James Nestor wrote this book that you're going to love called Breath. It's a really recent book. It just came out, I don't know, in the past year or so. And I just finished it. I read it as an ebook from Libby. And I would recommend that you read it as an ebook or the hard copy. It's pretty technical. It's got a lot of details in there. I think it'd be hard to go through as an audiobook. But he really details the history of pulmonology. Pulmonology is like people's breathing and the study of lungs and breathing diseases and issues. And he talks about how there's a lot of really interesting ancient like yogic breathing or just ancient sort of religious breathing traditions that people have done over the years and how those actually benefit your health. He's got a lot of interesting stories too, like how he did this study where he plugged up his nose and he only would breathe through his mouth for I think 10 days. And he did this whole study, I want to say it was at Stanford, where they checked his blood and his body composition and his yawns and his snoring and his sleep apnea and all kinds of stuff. And when he'd only do mouth breathing, all of his health declined and he got really, really unhealthy. And then when he switched, he kind of like taped his mouth when he would sleep at night, and he'd only breathe through his nose for I think 10 days. And doing the nasal breathing reversed all the health problems that he was getting. It was really, really interesting. He shares an interesting story about going through the catacombs under Paris and looking at skulls and the shapes of the nasal canals and skulls and stuff. Talks about, the nasal breathing, mouth breathing, holding your breath, different chewing techniques, yogic breathing, the history of these, how they help with different pathologies. So if you're any kind of health practitioner or you've got health problems or breathing problems, this is an essential book for you to read. I would say he does, just as like cons to the book, he does spend a lot of time sort of retelling his own little memoirs and kind of his own little narrative of stories. Like, I went to this place and I met this person and this is what they were like. And I felt that it did slow the pace of the book down a little bit, made it just a bit boring, almost like watching an old movie, old black and white movies, where they'd show the person like walking into the hotel and opening the door and going up the elevator and knocking on the door, and then the person answers and then they have a conversation. And that's kind of how I felt with his book. There'd be stuff where he would just expound on a bunch of weird details that were interesting but weren't really relevant to like breathing or what he learned. And it's like, just skip ahead to the conversation. So if you have to skip a few things in the book, don't be afraid to do that. And at the very beginning of the book, he's got, I want to say it's like his first or second chapter maybe, or maybe the introduction. At the very beginning of the book, he's got a long chapter where he talks all about this like very theoretical idea of evolutionary biology and how it like formed over millions of years to shape our nasal canals in a certain way. And it's interesting if you're into evolutionary biology, but it's not super relevant to like what you practically need to do for your breathing. So, and it's pretty monotonous and boring and highly theoretical. So that's, if you get stuck on that very beginning chapter, it's not essential that you read that chapter. Just skip it. Don't get stuck on that, okay? But if you're interested in breathing, he's got great stuff where he summarizes a lot of different breathing techniques over the years, puts it together in a really nice book, and helps you with some good information throughout the book on how you can improve your health, fix a lot of health issues just by changing your breathing techniques. Really interesting for anyone who's into health. I would say it's essential for you to read. Great read for you.